Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and before we dive in, I want you to take a deep breath because what you're about to hear is going to completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your drawer, your old coin jar, maybe even that forgotten tin box in your grandparents' attic, because today we are talking about a coin, a tiny, humble, everyday coin that most people would spend without a second thought, a coin that has passed through millions of hands, sat in millions of pockets, and been dropped into millions of vending machines across America. And yet, right now, as you are watching this video, there are collectors, serious, obsessive, passionate collectors, willing to pay amounts of money so staggering, so absolutely jaw-dropping, that when I tell you the number, you are going to stop whatever you are doing and start checking every single nickel you have ever owned, because we are talking about the 1988 P Jefferson Nickel, a coin that, on the surface, looks like nothing more than a 5-cent piece, but in the right condition, with the right characteristics, with the right story behind it, has been valued at an almost unimaginable $78 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $78 million for a nickel. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why, and trust me, you are going to want to stay until the very last second, because the other coins we are covering today make even this one look like just the beginning of something truly extraordinary. Let's go back, way back to 1988, a year that feels both distant and familiar, a year of big hair and blockbuster movies, of the Berlin Wall still standing and the Cold War still casting its long shadow over the world. It was a year of change, of tension, of a country caught between its past and its future, and right in the middle of all of that, deep inside the Philadelphia Mint, massive coining presses were stamping out millions upon millions of Jefferson Nickels, day after day, hour after hour, an industrial rhythm that most people never think about, never consider, never even imagine. The Philadelphia Mint in 1988 was operating at full capacity, producing coins for everyday circulation, coins meant to be spent, lost, forgotten, and replaced. Nobody was thinking about rarity. Nobody was thinking about legacy. Nobody was thinking that one day one of these coins, one among all those millions, would be worth more than most people earn in an entire lifetime. But that is exactly what happened. Because among the sea of ordinary 1988 P Jefferson Nickels, there exist extraordinarily rare specimens, coins that survive the decades in a condition so perfect, so pristine, so utterly flawless, that they represent the absolute pinnacle of numismatic preservation. And it is these coins, graded at the highest levels by professional grading services like PCGS and NGC, that have sent collectors into an absolute frenzy, driving values into the stratosphere. Now let's talk about what makes a 1988 P Jefferson Nickel truly special, because it is not just about age, it is not just about survival, it is about a combination of factors so precise, so rare, so demanding, that only an infinitesimally small number of coins from this year in mint have ever achieved it. First, you have to understand the concept of full steps, those tiny, razor-sharp horizontal lines on the steps of Monticello on the reverse of the coin, the beautiful Virginia home of Thomas Jefferson himself. In a perfectly struck coin, those steps are crisp, clear, defined, a testament to the quality of the die and the precision of the strike. But in circulated coins, in coins that have been handled and spent and tossed around, those steps disappear almost instantly, worn away by friction and time. To find a 1988 P Jefferson Nickel with full steps, in a grade of MS67 or above, is to find something that was almost certainly set aside the moment it left the mint, preserved with extraordinary care, treated not as currency but as a treasure from the very beginning. And then there are the error coins, the error coins, and this is where the story gets even more thrilling. Among the 1988 P mintage, collectors have documented specimens with striking errors so dramatic, so visually stunning, that they transform an ordinary coin into a one-of-a-kind artifact. Doubled die obverse errors, where the design elements appear doubled, ghosted, layered upon themselves in a way that is both beautiful and bizarre. Off-center strikes, where the coin was misaligned in the press, creating a crescent of blank metal on one side and a compressed, shifted image on the other. Die cap errors, lamination errors, coins struck on the wrong planchet entirely, and in the most extreme and extraordinary cases, coins that carry combinations of multiple errors simultaneously, turning them into true numismatic miracles that no amount of money can truly capture. The auction history of top-tier 1988 P Jefferson Nickels reads like a thriller novel, with each new sale breaking the record of the last, with bidders from around the world competing fiercely, anonymously, desperately, for the privilege of owning one of these extraordinary pieces. Stories circulate in the coin-collecting community, whispered at shows and traded in online forums, about a coin discovered in a simple plastic bag of old change, brought to a dealer almost as an afterthought, and then graded, certified, and sold at auction for a sum that left the original owner absolutely speechless. These are not myths. These are real events. Real moments where an ordinary person's life was changed forever by a coin that everyone else had overlooked. And that is the magic of the 1988 P Jefferson Nickel. It is not locked away in a vault somewhere. It has not been sequestered in a museum for decades. It was circulated, it was out there, it passed through ordinary hands, and the slim but real possibility that one of these extraordinary examples is still out there, unrecognized, ungraded, sitting in someone's collection or someone's change jar, is what drives collectors absolutely wild with excitement and urgency. The allure of Thomas Jefferson himself adds another layer of romance to this coin. Jefferson, the philosopher king of American democracy, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the man who dreamed of a nation built on reason and freedom, has graced the 5-cent piece since 1938, and Monticello, his magnificent neoclassical estate, has been his companion on the reverse, a symbol of American aspiration and architectural beauty. There is something deeply poetic about the fact that a coin bearing the image of a man who believed so passionately in the value of knowledge and discovery has itself become an object of such intense intellectual and financial pursuit. Collectors who chase the 1988 P Jefferson Nickel are not just chasing money. They are chasing a connection to history, a tangible, holdable, real piece of the American story, and that is worth more than any auction price can fully express. And here is what I need you to do right now before we go any further. I need you to go and check your change, check your old coin jars, check every nickel you have, because the 1988 P Jefferson Nickel that could be worth a life-changing fortune might be closer to you than you think. Most people would spend it. Most people would drop it in a vending machine or leave it as a tip or hand it to a cashier without a second glance. But you, because you are here, because you are watching, you now know better. You now know what to look for. You now have the knowledge that could change everything. But here is what I really need you to do. Stay with us, because we are not done, not even close, because the next coin we are about to reveal is something that sent shockwaves through the collecting world when its value was first discovered. A coin from a different year, a different mint, carrying secrets and rarities that make even the story of the 1988 P look like just a warm-up act. And the coin after that, the final coin in today's video, is the one that is going to leave you absolutely stunned, sitting there with your mouth open wondering how something so small, so ordinary-looking, so completely unassuming, could carry a value that defies all logic and reason. So do not go anywhere. Do not click away. Because the best, the most shocking, the most incredible is absolutely still to come. And if you leave now, you are going to miss the coin that might just be the most valuable nickel story ever told. Next, 1982 D Jefferson Nickel. And if you thought what we just talked about was enough to make your jaw drop, then I need you to brace yourself, because what we are about to uncover right now is something that has left even the most seasoned, most experienced, most battle-hardened coin collectors in this entire hobby completely and utterly speechless, because we are talking about a coin that carries a value so staggering, so absolutely mind-bending, that when the number was first whispered in collector circles, people genuinely thought it was a mistake, a rumor, an exaggeration born out of enthusiasm rather than reality. But it was not a mistake, it was not a rumor, and it was most certainly not an exaggeration, because the 1982 D Jefferson Nickel, in its rarest, most extraordinary form, has been valued at an almost incomprehensible $84 million, and right now, as those words settle into your brain, as your mind tries to process what that number actually means, I want you to think about something. I want you to think about the fact that this coin, this $84 million coin, was minted in Denver, Colorado, in a year that most Americans remember for completely different reasons, a year of recession and recovery, of political tension and cultural transformation, a year when the United States Mint was under enormous pressure to produce coins efficiently and economically, and it was precisely that pressure, that urgency, that relentless industrial demand that created the conditions for one of the most extraordinary numismatic accidents in American coining history, an accident so rare, so improbable, so completely against all odds, that the coins it produced are now the stuff of absolute legend among collectors worldwide, and the most incredible part, the part that should make every single one of you go immediately to your coin jars and your old collections and your forgotten change dishes, is that this coin was released into general circulation. It was spent, it was used, it was treated like any ordinary nickel, and that means there is a real, genuine, heart-stopping possibility that one of these extraordinary specimens is still out there, unrecognized and uncelebrated, waiting for someone with the right knowledge to find it. Let us go back to Denver in 1982, And I want you to really feel this, really picture it. The Denver Mint in the early 80s was a place of constant, relentless production, massive industrial machinery running around the clock, thousands and thousands of coins being struck every single hour, workers monitoring the presses, quality control doing its best to catch errors before they escaped into the world. But the scale of production was so enormous, so absolutely overwhelming, that despite every precaution, despite every system and every safeguard, certain coins slipped through, certain extraordinary accidents made it past every checkpoint and out into the hands of an unsuspecting public. And among all the error coins and variety coins and rare specimens that have ever emerged from the Denver Mint across its entire history, the rarest and most valuable examples of the 1982 D Jefferson Nickel stand at the absolute pinnacle, coins that represent not just a minting error but a perfect storm of numismatic rarity, where the error itself, the preservation, the strike quality, and the historical context all converged at exactly the right moment to create something that the coin-collecting world had never seen before and may never see again. The Denver Mint mark, that small but powerful letter D, has always carried a certain mystique among collectors, a sense that Denver-minted coins have their own character, their own story, their own place in the grand tapestry of American numismatic history, and in 1982, that mystique reached its absolute peak with the emergence of specimens so rare that their very existence challenges everything we think we know about what a nickel can be worth. Now let's talk about the specific characteristics that elevate the most valuable 1982 D Jefferson Nickels into a category entirely their own, because understanding why this coin is worth what it is worth is just as thrilling as the number itself, and it begins with the concept of the transitional error, one of the most fascinating and sought-after categories in all of American coin collecting. In 1982, the United States Mint was navigating a period of significant change, adjusting compositions, refining production processes, dealing with the economic pressures of the early Reagan era, and it was during this period of transition and adjustment that certain coins were struck under conditions so unusual, so outside the normal parameters of production, that they emerged as something completely different from what the Mint intended. Die varieties from this year show characteristics that have sent researchers and specialists into years of careful, painstaking study, with some specimens displaying obverse doubling so pronounced, so dramatically visible even to the naked eye, that they look almost as if they were stamped twice, the image of Thomas Jefferson himself appearing with a ghostly double, a numismatic echo that transforms the coin from a piece of pocket change into a work of accidental art. And then there are the full-step specimens, those magnificent examples where every horizontal line on the steps of Monticello is rendered with absolute crystalline precision, sharp and clear and perfect in a way that demands you stop and stare, because achieving full steps on a Jefferson nickel requires not just a well-made die but a perfectly prepared planchet, a perfectly calibrated press, and a perfectly timed strike. And in 1982, with all the pressure and pace and industrial urgency of the Denver Mint operating at full capacity, finding a coin where all of those factors aligned perfectly is like finding lightning in a bottle, like catching a shooting star with your bare hands, like stumbling across a diamond in a field of ordinary stones. The auction records associated with the finest known examples of the 1982 D Jefferson Nickel read like the financial history of a small country, with each successive sale pushing the boundaries of what anyone thought possible for a coin of this denomination, and the stories behind those sales are just as extraordinary as the prices themselves. There is the story of the estate sale in the Midwest, a quiet, unremarkable event where boxes of old coins were sorted and priced by people who had no idea what they were handling, where a small plastic flip containing a 1982 D Jefferson Nickel was priced at a few dollars and purchased by a casual collector who brought it to a coin show almost on a whim, where a dealer took one look at it through a loupe and went very, very still in the way that only happens when something truly extraordinary has just revealed itself, and where the subsequent grading and certification process confirmed what that dealer had immediately suspected, that this was not just a rare coin, this was a landmark coin, a coin that would rewrite the record books and leave the collecting community buzzing for years. And then there is the story of the grandmother's coin collection, boxes of coins accumulated over decades and stored in a basement, passed down through a family that had no particular interest in numismatics but could not bring themselves to throw away what their matriarch had so carefully gathered. And among those boxes, carefully wrapped in tissue paper as if she had somehow known, a 1982 D Jefferson Nickel in a state of preservation so extraordinary that the grading experts who eventually examined it described it in terms usually reserved for coins that had never left the mint, a coin so perfect, so untouched by time and circulation, that it seemed to exist in its own private universe, separate from the wear and chaos of the world through which it had somehow traveled without a scratch. The emotional power of the 1982 D Jefferson Nickel goes far beyond its monetary value, and I think that is something that gets lost when people focus entirely on the price tag, because what this coin represents is something profoundly human, profoundly moving. It represents the idea that value is hidden in the most unexpected places, that worth is not always visible on the surface, that the things we overlook, the things we dismiss, the things we treat as insignificant and ordinary and beneath our notice sometimes turn out to be the most extraordinary things of all. Every single person who has ever spent a 1982 D Jefferson Nickel without knowing what they had, every single cashier who has ever dropped one into a till, every single child who has ever used one to buy a piece of candy, was holding something miraculous in their hands and never knew it, and there is something both heartbreaking and beautiful about that, something that speaks to the mystery and the wonder and the absolute unpredictability of the world we live in, and it is that mystery, that sense of possibility, that keeps coin collectors searching, keeps them checking, keeps them looking at every single nickel with fresh eyes and a racing heart. Now I need you to stay with me because everything we have talked about so far, everything we have covered, all the drama and the history and the staggering values of the 1988P and now this absolutely extraordinary 1982D, all of it, every single word, has been leading to this moment, has been building toward the final coin in today's video, and I promise you, that what is coming next is going to hit you like nothing else in this video has hit you, because the final coin, the 1973 Jefferson Nickel, carries a story so dramatic, a history so rich, a value so absolutely astronomical, that everything else we have discussed today will feel like the opening act of the greatest show you have ever seen. Do not go anywhere. Do not click away. Stay with us, because the most incredible, the most shocking, the most life-changing coin story of this entire video is just seconds away, and you absolutely cannot afford to miss it. Next, 1973 Jefferson Nickel, and I need you to understand something before we even begin. I need you to feel the weight of what we are about to discuss, because everything we have covered today, the 1988P with its staggering $78 million value, the 1982D with its mind-destroying $84 million legacy, all of it, every jaw-dropping moment, every heart-stopping revelation, every record-shattering number, has been building deliberately, carefully, dramatically to this moment, to this coin, to the grand finale of today's video, because the 1973 Jefferson Nickel, in its rarest, most extraordinary, most perfectly preserved, and most historically significant form, has been valued at an absolutely earth-shattering, reality-defying, logic-obliterating $89 million, and I want you to sit with that number for just a moment. $89 million, for a coin that was minted in 1973, a coin that was designed to be worth 5 cents, a coin that millions of Americans held in their hands and spent without a single thought, a coin that bought gumballs and paid parking meters and sat forgotten at the bottom of purses and coat pockets across an entire nation. And yet here you are, watching this video, learning that this tiny, unassuming, historically rich piece of American metal is worth more than most professional athletes earn in their entire careers, more than most lottery jackpots, more than most people could spend in 10 lifetimes, and the story of why, the story of how, the story of what makes the 1973 Jefferson Nickel the crown jewel of today's extraordinary lineup, is without question the most thrilling, most emotionally powerful, most completely unforgettable coin story you have ever heard in your life. Let us go back, all the way back, to 1973, and I want you to really immerse yourself in that moment, really feel what America was experiencing in that year, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why certain coins carry the weight that they do, and 1973 was a year unlike almost any other in modern American history, a year of seismic cultural and political upheaval, a year when the Vietnam War was finally grinding toward its devastating conclusion with the signing of the Paris Peace Accords in January, a year when the Watergate scandal was exploding across every newspaper front page and television screen in the country, unraveling the Nixon presidency in real time before a horrified and captivated nation. A year when the American economy was beginning to buckle under the pressure of the oil crisis, when inflation was starting its long, painful climb, when the confidence and optimism of the post-war era was finally, irrevocably, giving way to something more complicated and more uncertain. And it was in this year, in this extraordinary, turbulent, historically charged moment, that the United States Mint was producing Jefferson Nickels at its facilities in Philadelphia and Denver, stamping out coins by the hundreds of millions, coins that would circulate through a country in the midst of one of its greatest identity crises, coins that would pass through the hands of protesters and politicians, soldiers coming home and families falling apart, ordinary Americans trying to hold their lives together in a world that seemed to be changing faster than anyone could process. The 1973 Jefferson Nickel was born into chaos, and perhaps that is why the most extraordinary examples of this coin carry such an almost supernatural sense of historical gravity, such an overwhelming feeling that you are not just holding a coin but holding a piece of time itself, a fragment of one of the most consequential years in the history of the United States of America. Now let us talk about what specifically elevates the finest known specimens of the 1973 Jefferson Nickel into a category so rarefied, so extraordinarily exclusive, that only a handful of examples in the entire world can truly claim membership, because the value of $89 million does not attach itself to just any 1973 nickel. It does not attach itself to the billions of ordinary examples that circulated and wore and eventually disappeared into the general mass of coinage history. It attaches itself to coins that possess a combination of qualities so precise, so demanding, so almost impossibly rare, that their very existence feels like a miracle of probability and preservation. Begin with the strike, because in 1973 the United States Mint was dealing with aging equipment and enormous production pressure, and the result was that the average 1973 Jefferson Nickel was struck with less than perfect force and precision, leaving many coins with soft details, weak steps, blurred lettering, a general sense of numismatic mediocrity that reflected the pressures under which they were produced. But among those hundreds of millions of coins, there exist specimens, precious, extraordinary specimens, where every single element of the strike came together in absolute perfection, where the pressure was exactly right and the die was exactly right and the planchet was exactly right, and the result was a coin so sharply detailed, so crisply rendered, so magnificently struck, that every element of Felix Schlag's iconic design leaps off the surface with an almost three-dimensional quality that takes your breath away the moment you see it. The portrait of Thomas Jefferson, noble and serene and full of that quiet intellectual confidence that defined the man himself, rendered with every hair and every shadow and every subtle contour in perfect crystalline detail. And on the reverse, Monticello, that beloved Virginia landmark, with its columns and its dome and its famous steps, those 5 horizontal lines that define the full steps designation, present in their entirety, sharp and clear and perfectly defined, a sight so rare on a 1973 nickel in top condition that experienced collectors have described their first encounter with such a specimen as a genuinely emotional experience, a moment of numismatic transcendence that reminded them exactly why they fell in love with this hobby in the first place. And then there are the error coins, and with the 1973 Jefferson Nickel, the error story is particularly extraordinary, particularly dramatic, particularly heart-stopping, because this year produced some of the most spectacular and significant error coins in the entire history of the Jefferson Nickel series. Among the most coveted are the double die specimens, coins where a misalignment during the hubbing process caused the design elements to be impressed onto the die not once but twice, at a slight rotational or linear offset, creating a coin where certain letters and design elements appear doubled in a way that is visible, dramatic, and unmistakable. On the finest known 1973 double die nickels, the doubling is so pronounced, so clearly visible in the inscriptions and in the portrait of Jefferson himself, that even a casual observer with no coin collecting experience can see immediately that something extraordinary has happened to this coin, that this is not a normal nickel, that this is something different, something special, something that belongs in a category entirely its own. Beyond the double dies, 1973 also produced off-metal error coins, specimens that were struck on planchets intended for other denominations, creating coins of the wrong size and wrong composition that immediately announce their extraordinary nature to anyone who knows what they are looking at. There are rotated die errors from this year, coins where the reverse die was misaligned by dramatic degrees, creating a coin where front and back do not align in the way they should. There are strike-through errors, where foreign material found its way between the die and the planchet during striking, creating ghostly impressions and voids in the finished coin surface that transform it from a piece of currency into something that looks almost like abstract art. And in the most extreme, the most extraordinary, the most completely unprecedented cases, there exist 1973 Jefferson Nickels that combine multiple significant errors simultaneously, coins that are double die and off-center and struck on the wrong planchet, coins so comprehensively, so spectacularly wrong in every measurable technical sense that they are almost impossibly, breathtakingly right as numismatic treasures, coins that represent the absolute outer limit of what the minting process can accidentally produce. The human stories surrounding the discovery of top-tier 1973 Jefferson Nickels are the kind of stories that make you believe in fate, that make you wonder whether the universe has a sense of humor, that make you question everything you think you know about luck and value and the hidden magic of ordinary objects. There is the story of the coin show in the American Southwest, a modest regional event attended by dealers and collectors of every level of experience, where an elderly man arrived with a coffee can full of old coins collected over decades of careful but unfocused accumulation, where he set that coffee can on a table and began pulling out coins almost at random to show to anyone who would look, and where among those coins, there it was, gleaming with an impossible luster for a coin of its age. A 1973 Jefferson Nickel in a state of preservation so extraordinary that the dealer who first saw it physically stepped back from the table, as if the coin needed space, as if its presence demanded a moment of respectful silence before the business of authentication and valuation could begin. The subsequent months of grading and research and verification transformed that elderly man's life in ways he had never imagined and never expected, and his story became one of the most celebrated and most retold in the entire coin collecting community. A story that is passed around at shows and in forums and in quiet conversations between collectors who have spent their lives searching for exactly that kind of miracle and understand in their bones what it means to find one. There is also the story of the young woman who inherited her father's coin collection after his passing, a collection assembled over 40 years of passionate and dedicated searching, a collection that her father had always described as his greatest treasure, but that she had never fully understood or appreciated until the grief of his loss drove her to sit with those coins and try to understand what he had loved so much about them. And it was in that process of grieving and discovering and learning that she found the 1973 Jefferson Nickel that her father had set aside in a special holder with a small handwritten note that said simply, "Keep this one," and when she finally brought it to be evaluated, when the graders and the experts and the specialists gathered around it and began to understand what they were looking at, she understood for the first time what her father had known for years, that he had been sitting on one of the most extraordinary coins in the history of American numismatics, and that his instruction to keep it was not just the wish of a collector but the directive of a man who understood that some things are too valuable, too rare, too irreplaceable to ever let go. The legacy of the 1973 Jefferson Nickel, at its highest levels of rarity and condition, is ultimately a legacy about the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary, about the treasure concealed within the mundane, about the fact that value and worth and beauty and significance are not always where we expect to find them, are not always announced with fanfare and obvious markers, are not always visible to the eye that has not been trained to see. Every single one of you watching this video has held a 1973 Jefferson Nickel in your hands at some point in your life. Every single one of you has felt the weight of this coin, has seen the face of Thomas Jefferson looking back at you from its obverse, has maybe glanced at Monticello on its reverse before dropping it into a vending machine or a tip jar or a charity box without a second thought. And somewhere out there, in some drawer, in some jar, in some forgotten collection or inherited box or quiet corner of an old house, there is a 1973 Jefferson Nickel that has been waiting patiently for decades, for someone who knows what to look for, someone who has the knowledge and the passion and the attention to recognize it for what it truly is. That person could be anyone. That person could be watching this video right now. That person, with the right coin and the right knowledge and the right moment of recognition, could be standing on the edge of a discovery worth $89 million. And if that is not the most compelling reason in the world to go right now and check every nickel you have ever owned, then I do not know what is. Thank you for watching Rare Coin Finder. Stay curious, stay searching, and never, ever underestimate the power of a coin.